Don Nicasio lived with his wife, Maria de Rosario, in the small pueblo of Chamilpa, and there he earned a meager living as a woodcutter, someone who cut wood and brought it to market and sold it there. He and his wife got by, but only kind of barely. And so it was that as November approached and Maria said to him, "Nicasio, I need money from you. We need to make an ofrenda for El Dia de los Muertos. We need to have an offering for Juanita." He dismissed her out of hand. "What? Such silliness? Why, there's barely enough for us to eat, the two of us, and you want me to be providing food for the dead? Such ridiculousness. I'll have nothing to do with it." And as he started to stomp off, Maria called after him, "Have you forgotten our darling Juanita? Have you forgotten already?" Well, of course he hadn't. It had only been 2 years since they'd lost their little girl. But the fact of the matter was that he could hardly bear to think of her, let alone speak of her, and the idea of having an ofrenda, an offering in his own home dedicated to her memory, was simply more than he could bear to even contemplate. And so he walked off, carrying his machete, thinking, "I'll go to the base of the mountain, where there's the best wood. Maybe there I'll be able to find an oak tree. Hardly anyone knows where to find oak these days, and that will sell well in the marketplace." And so he walked and he walked, and he finally got to the woods and located there a giant oak. And the light was beginning to dim as he walked so far, but he was determined, and so he climbed up into the big tree until he could rest in the solid V of 2 large branches. And he pulled out his machete and he began to cut the wood that fell to the ground that he could sell. And he was working away as the light grew dimmer and dimmer, when all of a sudden, snap, the great branches closed around him and he was trapped. He struggled and he twisted, but there was no escaping. The branches held him fast. "Help!" he cried. "Someone help me!" But he knew that he was far, too far from the village for anyone to hear his call. And finally, after twisting and turning and calling, he just gave up and lay there as the dark came on. But finally, in the distance, he heard the sound of the church bells from the pueblo. And then his eye was caught by something in the distance. It turned out that a procession was coming straight toward him. And as they grew closer and closer, he began to call out, "Help! Help!" But no one turned an eye. Still closer they came, and still stranger the procession became. These people were ragged, their faces drawn with hunger. Their morrales, their backpacks were empty and perhaps with holes in them, and they trudged in silence. And then Nicasio began to recognize faces. But wait, there's my compadre Beto. How could this be? He's been gone for 3 years. And there, is that not Hilario? Hilario's been gone maybe 10. What is this? And the procession went on, and there toward the end was his darling Juanita, her dress in tatters, looking hungry and sad. "Juanita, my darling, my girl!" But she did not turn, and the procession continued on past him. And Nicasio was as stuck and as despairing as a man could possibly be. The night went on, and the night went on, and once again he heard the church bells, and the procession began to come back toward him. But this time somehow altered, and he realized that now the faces looked happier. the clothes restored, the people no longer hungry. As they trudged past, he knew that there would be no good to call out. And yet his heart lifted when he saw his little Juanita carrying a candle and a plate of beans and wearing a simple new dress. And as the last person passed by, snap, the branches came open and he was free. Nicasio grabbed his machete and he scrambled down the tree and in the dim and growing light ran home as fast as he could, panting all the way till he arrived at his own doorstep. And there Maria was to greet him, not with relief, but with anger. Where have you been? On this night of all nights, el Dia de los Muertos, you gave me nothing. All I could do with my laundry money was to buy our Juanita a simple dress and a plate of beans and a stub of candle, and here you were gone all night, probably drinking all our money away. No, said Nicasio, it isn't like that. It isn't like that at all. And he told her, detail by detail, the story of his night. And then he collapsed, crying into her arms. I'm sorry, he said. I'm sorry. Next year, whatever it takes, there will be an ofrenda. There will be an offering for our girl. And through the sobs, he began to talk. Do you remember? Do you remember how she ran so lightly, as if she were a butterfly? Do you remember her first word? How she said, Papa, that baby. Do you remember? And as the light grew, the stories continued.